Okay, good evening, everyone. Let me bring this up a little bit. There we go. So, hi, everyone. My name's Jenny Carty. I am one of the science educators here at Kopernik Observatory and Science Center. And we welcome you all tonight to our Friday night public program. And we have a really amazing presentation tonight. I'll speak on that in just a moment. Before we do, a little introduction to Kopernik. First, I'm very curious. Raise your hand if this is your first time up at Kopernik Observatory. Awesome. All right. Very good. I'd say that's over half. So welcome. Raise your hand if you're a Kopernik member. Oh, we got lots of Kopernik members out there too. Good. So just one way that you can support Kopernik while also getting access to all of our Friday programs throughout the year is by becoming a member, and that's right under our support section. What's really neat about our membership program is the reciprocal membership with the Association of Science and Technology Centers, ASTC. And that lets you get free or reduced admission at numerous, in fact, locations, science centers, technology centers, and museums across the United States, and even some international ones as well. So the Kopernik membership is very powerful in that way. So that's one way to support us and come back for future events. I also liked, for newcomers, one way to track whether we're going to have clear skies, because of course that's a big goal of our observatory, is after our public programs, we want to be able to share the night sky with you and all of the objects that are out there. There's some really good ones this time of year, including planets. And if you scroll down to the bottom of our page, you get to the clear sky chart. When you click on the clear sky chart, you'll see this breakdown of our forecast coming up in the near future over the next few days, including tonight. And ideally what we want to see here is dark blue across the board on these top rows. Sadly, we seem to have had some bad luck tonight. It was clear earlier. In fact, with the field trip we had here today, they were observing the sun safely through our solar telescope. But as we head into, of course, our Friday night program, it clouds up some. So that happens sometimes, and it clears up after. But we'll see. It looks like there's a chance it's partly cloudy. If there's any chance to observe something out there tonight after the program, we'll make sure you do that. And if not, we're happy to take people on telescope tours as well to show you our resources for the next time you come up. All right, so that's our clear sky chart, a great place to go to access our forecast in an astronomical sense. I also want to show you, if you go to this tab, Public Programs, Upcoming Friday Nights, that brings you here, and it shows you our upcoming schedule for this season. We had some nice talks, Comets and Meteors. We had our Hocus Pocus Halloween event. Last week we talked about the record number of tornadoes here in New York. This is tonight's presentation. Again, I'll mention that in just a minute here. And then CRISPR, the key to life's basic mysteries. So some variety of topics. It's not just all astronomy. That's, of course, a focus for us, but we branch out to all topics in STEM. So I also want to mention tomorrow, in fact, November 9th, is Carl Sagan's, what would be his 90th birthday. And Cornell University is celebrating this up in Ithaca. And they have a whole event schedule that you can access on the Cornell EDU website. So if you want to learn more about the events, they have activities for families. So there's something for all ages. They have their schedule breakdown here, some presentations. They'll have clips of people wishing a happy birthday to the late Carl Sagan. They have birthday cupcakes and apple cider. So lots of fun aspects to that event. Worth looking into, and it is free and open to the public. So there's no tickets required or anything like that. Just to give those that may not know Carl Sagan an idea of who he was, He was an astronomer. He worked at Cornell University. And one of his most famous quotes, this is kind of a paraphrase, but this says, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us." If you look very carefully at that tiny little dot in the image where the arrow is pointing, this is an image of the Earth taken by the Voyager 1 spacecraft in 1990 after it had been traveling for 15 years or so. And it turned its cameras back on the inner solar system, and that's what Earth looked like after already venturing well into our solar system. So just this pale blue dot. And there's another version of it, too, that I really like from the Cassini spacecraft. If you're wondering what this big object here is, that's Saturn. It's the darker side of Saturn at that time when this image was captured. And you can see the glowing rings here, too. And right there, another pale blue dot showing Earth from the Cassini spacecraft. So that's one of my favorite quotes from Carl Sagan, but there are many, and he was a brilliant person. So worth looking into him more and celebrating his birthday tomorrow at Cornell University. With that said, though, we are here for a very exciting presentation from Peter Klimas from Vestal High School. And this is going to be on the origins of time and the link between astronomy and mythology with us. So with that, I will pass it off to you, Peter.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. I'd like to say a big thank you to my students, both present and past, because this is a talk that I have developed over a long time and that has changed and evolved. And this talk tonight is the first time that I'm ever going to be doing it in this sort of a way. I've kind of tweaked it and adjusted it. I presented this here actually at Kopernik in the past, before the YouTube streaming days, but this is something a little bit different, a little bit new. All right, and so that's what I've called it. But over time, I've developed more and more ideas. And what I've realized is that the new name of this talk, all right, the one that should have been on the website, is called The Seven Gods of the Sky. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, the seven gods of the sky. And the reason for that is because the seven gods of the sky, this talk tonight, it's the intersection of astronomy. Now, when I say astronomy, what I am talking about is the astronomy that I'm interested in the most, which is ancient astronomy. Astronomy that's done by ancient peoples without the use of a telescope, with only the naked eye, although this is still something that you can get into and you can do over many years and you can do very seriously. But that's the kind of astronomy that I'm going to be talking to you about, which intersects with mythology and stories. Now, tonight we're going to hear some Norse myths, but I would also include in this category fairy tales and folk tales. This is the sort of mythology and stories that intertwines with the astronomy. And finally, the keeping of time refers to calendars and how we keep track of time. Things that kids learn my kids learn in preschool, right? They start getting the calendar out every day and they move the little, over to the next pocket in the next day. But where do these calendars come from that we use? And what's up with all the amounts of time? And how are these all intersecting in the middle there with tonight's talk? Now, the reason I changed that name as well is because the same astronomy, mythology, and the keeping of time is the framework in which I gave another talk, which is on YouTube. You could go check it out. All right, here I am at Kopernik, and it's called The Marriage of the Sun and the Moon. And it's the same sort of ideas, but applied to the sun and the moon cycles. Totally different topic, but the same framework in which I'm thinking. And then, just to put this out there, we got such a big group tonight. If you enjoy the talk tonight, all right, if you're excited about it, then I would encourage you to come back, right? We got to get Drew Desker, that guy, and say, get Pete Klimas on the schedule for the spring, and I will do another talk that I've never done before, but this is something that I've been looking into, and it's going to sit Venus. It's going to be a talk all about Venus and mythology, astronomy, and the keeping of time having to do with the planet Venus. All right, but with that, let's get into this talk, the 7 gods of the sky. All right, the 7 gods of the sky. And what we want to do is take you over to Stellarium, right, our sky software, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. So this is just, I opened it up, all right, is how it opened up. And we're looking at the sky, and I want to rewind right now. Go back, 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 back. Rewind that sky. Oh! Because here, right at around sunset, we've got the moon. Did you see the moon out there? About a first quarter moon out tonight. Now, if you were out earlier, and I've been checking this out, I've been taking some pictures. I've been thinking about that future talk. Venus has been out in the evening time, bright star in the sky. But what I really want to do is go back a little bit further and a little bit further here and grab that sun. All right, here is the sun. We're going to now do a lot of things. Let's start by turning off the atmosphere. Did you know that on the moon there's no atmosphere, there's no air? And you could see the stars in the daytime. And then let's turn off the ground. Let's turn off the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. And let's turn off these icons that are going to show up. Let's center on the sun. Let's change the mount on the telescope so that we don't get a headache when I'm about to do. Let's turn on some constellation lines and labels and images, because you see, if you watch the sun over a long period of time, you'll see that it moves through the constellations. Now, what the heck are we doing right here? Okay, we're watching the sun over many, 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 many days, and we're plotting where is the sun in the background stars. So remember, I turned off the ground. So you're looking at the sun rising and setting. You're looking right through the ground at the sun, and then you're looking at it rising and setting, and you're keeping track of it, and that's what we're looking at. But if you were actually to do this, what you would do is you'd go out in the early morning, and you would see what the sky looked like, the stars, and then the sun would rise into it, and it would wash out what you could see. You would go out after sunset, and you would see where the sun was in the constellations, because there they are now that the sun has set. And if you keep track of this, you see that the sun moves through these special constellations. There's Taurus the bull. There's oh, that's me, Gemini. Cancer, my wife. We've got Leo the lion. Do you recognize these constellations? Virgo, the virgin. We've got Libra. There's a special name for these constellations. Shout it out. The zodiac constellations. There's Scorpius, my brother. Sagittarius, the hunter. Capricorn, the fish goat. And you got Aquarius, the water bearer. Pisces, the fish. And we're coming around Aries, my daughter. And we got Taurus, the bull. That's where we started. So that was a whole year of observing, and we're watching the sun move through these constellations, the constellations that the sun is in at different moments in time. Now, I am seeing something that I want to get. I want to grab this guy right here, and because did you notice that the sun wasn't the only thing in the sky that was moving through the constellations? Did you notice that? There were other things moving through the constellations. There was a couple of them kind of going back and forth there. Did you see those guys going back and forth? And there was another one that was like, wow, goes by, wow, goes by. Did you see that one going by? It was going by. Wow, it was really fast the way that I had the settings. But I'm going to grab this one right here, and I am going to center on this other light in the sky that doesn't do what the stars do. And I'm going to watch it for a little while. I'm going to fast forward, fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. And we're going to watch this thing. And we're going to watch it, move through Capricorn, kind of like the sun. But it's, there's the sun. You wouldn't be able to see that light in the sky because the sun would wash out your view. But now it's moving away from the sun, and you'd be able to get a view of it maybe at a time like right after sunset or in the morning hours, depending on which side of the sun it is. It's moving through Gemini. It's moving through Cancer, and we're just watching this light in the sky, and it's doing this weird thing. It's wandering through the constellations. And let's wait for it. Let's wait for it. What are you doing? What are you doing? This thing now turns around We call that retrograde motion. And you're plotting it night after night after night after night after night. You're not going out one night and seeing this happen. You're plotting it night after night after night, and you're watching that thing do some really mysterious motions in the sky over many, many nights, over the months, over the years. You're seeing these lights in the sky that don't do what the stars do. Come on, Mr. Klimas. What happened to my presentation? This is the presentation. Yeah. All right. So, I'm going to tell you two stories tonight, and they're both Norse myths. And the Norse myths are going to set ourselves up to understand some mythology so that we can then bring it back into the calendars and the astronomy. I was showing you some of the astronomy. So let's start here with the Norse origin of the creation. And the origin of the whole world, the origin of the universe, was in ice and fire. You had Muspelheim, the world of fire, that gets together with Niflheim, the world of the fog and the ice, and these two combine to form the first being Ymir that emerges, and the second being the ice cow that starts licking the ice, and it starts licking the ice like a salt block, and it eventually licks out all these other beings that come into existence in the universe. Now, the Norse had a complicated system for, where everybody existed. But there was Midgard. This was the earth where we live. There was this land of the gods, Asgard, a rainbow bridge that you had to climb up to get to the land of the gods. Muspelheim, the land of fire. You had Niflheim, that land of the ice and the fog. You had the land of the dwarves and the elves and the other gods and the frost giants, because some of those first beings were these big, giant, ugly ice giants, frost giants, and they lived in this land, Jotunheim. But the grandson of Ymir, the first being, is this guy who I think you all heard of before. Odin, or maybe you haven't heard of before, his other name that he was called, Woden. And Odin, this god, the grandson of the first being, got together with his two brothers and killed his grandfather. Only death can pay for life. And in the killing of Ymir, they used Ymir's big hulking body to create the world. See, the dome of the sky that we see when we look out in the nighttime, that dome of the sky is actually the inside of Ymir's skull that had been lowered down on top of the earth. And the mountains, these are just like some bones of Ymir that were left over from the slaying of Ymir by Odin and his two brothers. His two brothers kind of fade away, and Odin becomes the All-Father, the father of all the gods in Asgard, and the father of all of human beings, because Odin breathes spirit into the elm tree and to the ash tree and makes women and men. Now, other depictions of Odin here. We have Odin as the Wanderer, who, Odin had many names, and Odin was very nosy. He was a very nosy god. He loved to see what his creation, what his people were doing, so he would come into the taverns in his cloak and his hood, and he would be sitting in the back, and he'd be listening. He'd be, wanting to hear the goings-on. And Odin was often depicted with his two ravens, Thought and Memory, and he would send Thought and Memory out into the world, and the ravens would listen to people and see what they were doing and report back to Odin. And his wolves that he had with him, and his staff that he would throw into battle to start the battles. So there's Odin, also known as Woden. Now, in the land of the frost giants, these creatures were big and ugly, but there was one that was not like the others, and this was Loki. Loki was a trickster god, and Loki was originally a frost giant, but his charms were so powerful that he even charmed Odin. And Odin and Loki swore an oath to each other to be blood brothers. Now, this is different than the Marvel movies, isn't it? Yeah? Loki was, Odin's blood brother. Odin's blood brother in the mythology. That's who Loki was. And see, he's got this red hair. I think of Austin Powers, right? That women want him and men want to be him. That's Loki. And Loki gets everybody into trouble, but then he gets them out of trouble, and then they just thank him and they appreciate him. What a trickster, right? He was the problem in the first place. And so Loki, he sets up in Asgard, the land of the gods. But Loki leaves his wife and children there, and he goes into Jotunheim, his true home. And his wife is suspicious, And then he comes back and he's just too full of himself. He's too happy. He's not the normal Loki that he normally is. He leaves a second time and his wife is more suspicious of him. And he returns again and he's happy in this good mood. And he leaves a third time and Odin takes notice. And Odin, with his one eye that he gouged out for extra sight and wisdom, is able to see into Jotunheim and see that Loki had been visiting the lair of Angerboda, and Loki had been getting busy with Angerboda every time he visited her, and had produced 3 children, the 3 children of Loki. Now these children are not the children that you were expecting. This giant snake, this wolf, and this little girl. And in this picture, the 3 children, they look as if they're almost friendly, but these children are not friendly. Odin knows that these children will be the undoing of the gods of Asgard. That snake will grow so large and be so powerful that it will surround the earth itself. That little girl is actually half dead and half alive. Hel is her name. And I should have mentioned Jormungandr. Let's all say Jormungandr. That was that name up there for the snake. Let's say Hel. Yeah, Hel. And Fenrir the wolf, though, was the most fearsome of the 3 children of Loki. Fenrir the wolf was the child that Odin feared the most. Odin would have nightmares about this wolf. And so Odin decided that he needed to do something about these 3 children. He needed to send his 2 sons, great warriors, Tyr, also known as Tju, and Thor, Odin's sons, brothers from other mothers. And he sent these 2 into the realm of the frost giants to kidnap the children of Loki. And this was to be a fearsome, terrible journey into this land of frost giants, but nobody came to meet them, and they just pranced right in. And they took the children, and even Angerboda, the children's mother, was not there to stop them, and this was very curious. Tyr was getting really curious, and they're just coming right out with the children, and says to Thor, you know, this is not to be trusted. What is going on here? This should have been in battle. But Thor, like himself, is like, Tyr, don't worry about it. This is so easy. Let's just bring them back. Odin wants them transported to Asgard. And so these 2 bring the children, and Odin needs to decide what to do. So he first decides that Jormungandr, the giant snake, gets cast into the sea. Now, the sea and the earth in this Norse mythological view is like land surrounded by water, right? This is the earth. It's just a body of land, and surrounding it is water, and that is the whole earth. It's not our globe that we picture today with different continents. And so Jormungandr goes into the sea and grows so large that he ends up nibbling on his own tail. This has a name, the Ouroboros, right? The snake that eats itself, that consumes itself. Now, the second of the children, Hel, or sometimes called Hela, the living are disgusted by her half sloughed off face, but the dead can stand her. So Odin decides to make Hel the ruler of the realm that comes to be known after her, Hel, where people go when they die, but only those that die terrible deaths, like things like old age and disease, all right? People that die gloriously in battle, they go to Asgard and they live in Valhalla, and they get to fight day after day and then come home and eat and drink mead and then, you know, go out the next day and do the same thing with Odin. So Hela is also dealt with and rules the realm of the dead. But what to do with Fenrir? Fenrir was giving Odin nightmares. Because that young pup right there, Tyr, was playing with him. Tyr liked him. Tyr let him back. He was like a little dog to Tyr, but to Odin, that was his nightmares night after night. This thing was coming for him, and it was going to rip out his throat. So they decided to play a game with Fenrir because his strength had become renowned. He was one of the most powerful beings in the universe. They decided to play a game called, let's chain you up and see if you can get out. Now, Fenrir thought that this was a fun game to play, and the first time they chain him up, he easily busts the chains, no problem whatsoever. Now, Odin was hopeful that Fenrir would have gotten imprisoned that time, but no such thing happened. So the gods set to work to make a more fearsome chain, a chain that was twice as strong. And when all of the gods did their best effort to make this chain, a chain so famous it was given a name, Dromi, this chain, they had to bring it again to Fenrir and to test his strength. And so Odin says, let's do another test. You passed the first test so well. And you see Fenrir, he was very vain. And he was very sure of his strength. And he agreed again to be chained up. But this time, as he was being chained up, he became suspicious of Odin's treachery. And he became suspicious, but it was too late. He was already there. He was already being chained. And this time he strains and strains and eventually busts the chains and gets free one more time. Now, you can't make a chain stronger than the strongest chain. Once you make the strongest chain, what do you got to do? You got to get a magic chain. You got to go to the dwarves. And in the land of the dwarves, they made Odin a magical chain that was made from 6 ingredients. The footfalls of a cat, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. Now, if you're like, fish don't have breath, cats are too quiet, you can't hear them tromping around, that's because the dwarves took those things out of this world and they weaved them into a magical thread named Gleipnir. Gleipnir, this little silken golden rope, and they delivered it to Odin. This was the chain that was going to be binding Fenrir the wolf. Now, Odin had to get Fenrir to agree one more time to be chained up. But since Fenrir was suspicious, he wouldn't agree, even though he wanted to. He wanted to prove how massively strong he was. But this time he needed to take a hostage. And he would only agree if someone would put their hand in his mouth. Well, all the gods stepped back, except for the bravest, Tyr. Tyr, also known as Tew. Even Thor was afraid. But Tyr kind of loved Fenrir, and he knew what needed to be done. He had the courage to put his hand in the beast's mouth. And when they tied up Fenrir with Gleipnir, the more he struggled, the tighter it cinched. And the gods started to laugh at him. And Fenrir knew that as he struggled and he couldn't get out, that it was time to bite. And he bit off Tyr's hand. They stuck a sword in his mouth so that he couldn't keep biting. A river of saliva dripped forth from his huge jaws, and there he was, bound and chained. And Odin believed that he had taken care of the last of Loki's children. But you see, soon after, Odin's dreams would return. And one day, Fenrir returns to haunt him. So that was the first Norse story that I wanted to tell you tonight. All right, it's kind of a great story here just after Halloween. We've kind of got a monster story. All right, and I want to take a little bit of break from the mythology, because if you remember, this talk is about the astronomy, mythology, and the keeping of time. And the third piece is the keeping of time. And I would like to ask you tonight, in this guy's opinion, all right, what is the most fundamental amount of time? What amount of time do I believe is the most basic? And I say this from a human point of view because I have 3 children, and you got to teach the children this amount of time or you're going to go bananas. You're going to go bonkers. What do you think back there? The week is not my most fundamental amount of time. The year is not my most fundamental amount of time. Thank you for guessing. This is in my opinion, you know? Another guess back there. The month is not it. The children need to learn this, or you as a parent are going to lose your mind. The second, the day. The children need to go to bed at night and they need to sleep, or you're going to get woken up 1,000 times and you're going to lose your mind. You need to get accustomed to this day, which is the cycle of the sun rising and setting. I believe this to be just a fundamental amount of time that we as humans, we get used to it. We go to bed, right? You're going to get tired. You could stay up tonight all night, but you're going to get really tired and you're going to need to go to sleep. And it's going to get you real soon. This idea of sleeping and waking and sleeping and waking in this cycle that we call the day. Now, I have a second most fundamental amount of time that we as humans had to deal with. And the problem is that we don't think we have to deal with it anymore because we could just go to Wegmans whenever you want in like the middle of the night. But if you were a Norseman living up in the cold, right, realms of Europe, you would need to be prepared. You would need to be prepared for the winter time is exactly right. And this amount of time was already mentioned. It is the seasons. And how long does it take to go through those seasons? 1 year. I believe that this to be the second most fundamental amount of time. We need to be careful because right there in the winter time, it's going to be really cold and you need to be prepared, and you also can't grow any more food, so you better have stored some. You've got to get used to this amount of time. Now, in the original version of this talk, the year, it's its own talk. The Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, this is fascinating. We must make haste. Let's move on. Maybe some other time we could talk about the year. How long's a year? Like 365 and not even a quarter, because, it's even more complicated. But let's go. Here we go. Stop talking about that, Klimas. What about an amount of time in between the day and the year? The month is exactly what I wanted you to say. The month. Why do we have months? Because wait, the day, the earth turns around once. The year, the earth goes around the sun. But what about the months? What's up with them? The month. The moon goes around in about a month. Even the word comes from the moon. The months. The months. And you see, I just wanted to tell you about a couple of the months that I find curious. They're named after numbers, like September. You know what the prefix sept means? 7. And October, like month number 8. And Nov is like a little bit more like a nonagon. It's a 9-sided figure. And Dec, like a decimal, right? How many digits do we have in the decimal system? 10 digits, right? The 10th month, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. And you're saying, no, you're tricking me right now. But that's because there were these extra 2 months that were added in by those Roman leaders. You know them? Julius and Augustus. You've got July and August adding into this numbered scheme where months number 7, 8, 9, and 10 get pushed off by 2 places. All right, the months we just briefly mentioned. Okay, but I need to tell you another story, because to make the point what I want to make today, you need to know about another story, a Norse comedy. We did a monster story, so now we need a comedy. But it's a mythology story, so, right? It's not like stand-up comedy. It's like you got to appreciate it for what it is. And this is the theft of Thor's hammer, because you see, the Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, is the weapon that defends the realm of the gods. I mean, the gods are powerful, but Thor is even more powerful, and he has a belt like the people lift in the gym with, and it makes him twice as strong, but the hammer makes him infinitely strong. He can just take out everybody with a hammer. He can make it grow as big as he wants. He can make it small as he wants, tuck it in his pocket, and it always returns to his hand. He can call it forth. That hammer, and it's a short-handed. Who makes a sledgehammer with a short handle? That's its own story. Loki does. He screws everything up. He makes a short-handled hammer. But Thor was strong enough to wield even the short-handled sledgehammer, and it made him all-powerful. So one morning he wakes up, and the hammer's gone. Well, who do you think took it? Loki. Of course Loki took it. You took it, Loki. But Loki's like, no, it really wasn't me. You got to believe me. Don't beat me up. I didn't take the hammer. And it really wasn't Loki. And in the back here we have the goddess, the Norse goddess of love and of beauty, Freya. And Thor and Loki needed Freya's help. Now Freya here is very graceful, very beautiful. wears this necklace, the necklace of the Brissings. This is a reference to the Milky Way galaxy. When you can go outside and see the Milky Way galaxy, that is the necklace that the sky is wearing. That is the necklace of the Brissings. That beautiful. And graceful like a cat, that's Freya. And Thor and Loki go to Freya because they need another special artifact that she possesses, the falcon feathered cloak. And when you put this falcon feathered cloak on, you can fly. And Loki agrees to fly into the land of the frost giants and find out, because there's probably a frost giant that took the hammer, who took the hammer. And so he does. And there, sitting on his mountain, looking really pleased with himself today, is Thrym, the lord of the ogres. And Thrym practically admits to Loki that it was he who took the hammer, but he buried it 8 miles deep in the earth. And he will not give it back unless. Well, unless what? Says Loki. Unless he gets to marry Freya. And so Loki returns to the gods and says, good news, we can get the hammer back. All we have to do is give up Freya for a marriage, and the hammer is ours. Well, Freya is furious, very furious, and so they call a getting together, a meeting of the gods, and there is Odin, and they need to decide what to do, because they need the hammer. They can't give up Freya. And so from the back of the room, Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, has an idea. And his idea is that what we could do is that we could dress up Thor like Freya, and we could send Thor into the wedding. And when Thrym returns the hammer, he'll be returning it to Thor. So Thor, you know, this symbol of masculinity, this loves to eat, loves to drink, loves to be a man, beat people up. He gets dressed up, gets the necklace of the Brissings, and here is Loki, who has shapeshifted into a feminine form. Because, see, Loki is a shapeshifter, and this is the feminine Loki, who is having a blast dressing Thor up and going with Thor, furious Thor, who does not like to be dressed up like this, into the land of the frost giants, riding the chariot of goats, meeting Thrym in his filthy lair for the stupid wedding. And at the wedding feast, they bring out the tray of pastries for all the ladies, and Freya eats the whole thing. And they bring out the oxen, and Freya eats a whole ox all to herself. And they bring out salmon, you know, like the big, big salmons that have been filleted, and Freya's eating them. Another one, down, drinking casks of mead. And even this fool, Thrym, starts to get a little suspicious and says, my, what an appetite you have. And Loki, of course, weasels his way in and says, oh, that is because Freya has been fasting for 8 days and 8 nights in anticipation of this wedding. She couldn't eat a thing. And so Thrym gets some ideas and wants to sneak a kiss. So he pulls back the veil, and he sees this red, beady, angry eye staring at him. And it says, oh my, what red eyes you have. And Loki says, oh, it's because Freya has not slept for 8 days and 8 nights in anticipation of the wedding. Well, Thrym, he wants to consummate this marriage. So he brings out the hammer and he puts it right in the lap of Freya, who furiously takes out the entire wedding party, smashing heads, killing Thrym, killing everyone who's there, except for Loki, who is hiding behind, under a table, and at the end, who shapeshifts back into his normal form, peeks out, afraid of getting killed right there in the moment. And Thor says, Loki, behind you! And as Loki turns in terror, Thor loosens his belt and says, pass me that last piece of salmon. So you've gotten to know 2 stories now of the Norse, and we're going to weave these together, all right? We're going to weave them together with back to the amounts of time, because there's some amounts of time that I haven't discussed yet, and one of them is the little guys. The little guys are smaller than the day. There's 3 of them. Smaller than the day would be the hours and the minutes and the seconds. Have you ever asked yourself, why do we have 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. for 24 hours in a day? Why 24? Why didn't we make a nicer number? And why do we have 60 seconds in the minute and 60 minutes in the hour, right? What's up with these 12s and 24s and 60s? Well, it turns out that the Babylonians had an interesting way of counting, right? We like to count up to 10 on our 10 fingers, but if you take your thumb and you use your thumb as the counter, then you can count on your finger segments. And how many finger segments do you have? You have 12. You have 4 fingers with 3 finger segments. And so you could take that thumb and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're counting on your fingers. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now you got another hand, so you could also go up to 24 on the 24 finger segments. 12 and 12, AM and PM make it to 24. Now if you want to go higher than 24, you could do it that way. But then you could also say, I'm going to take my first finger and I'm going to count on my finger segments of the other hand, and I could go up to 12. I could take my second finger, go up to 24, third finger, 36, fourth finger, 48, and fifth finger, and I'm out of fingers now, I can go up to 60. 60 is also 5 groups of 12. 12s and 12s and 24s and 60s are all in this base 12 Babylonian counting system. And we still use it today in the seconds and the minutes and the hours of the day. All right, but then, finally, what I really wanted to tell you about today was this last amount of time that we hadn't discussed yet, and that is the week. Why do we have weeks? And why 7? Why do we have 7 days in the week? What is up with the 7? All right, don't spoil it, anybody, if you know. Now, one answer that is very unsatisfying to me is that the moon has about 7 days in a quarter of its cycle. That if you go from the moon as it looks outside tonight, about a first quarter moon, although it's a little bit shy of the first quarter, and you wait till that full moon, it's going to be about 7 days. Now, I would say maybe 8 days from today with the look of the moon, but technically it's 7.4 days, and you're like, well, that rounds to 7. So a week is nice, and the moon is a nice, beautiful clock in the sky that keeps track of the time for you, and that if you were, out on some adventure, you could look at the moon, and you could even lose track of a couple days, and you could estimate how many days it's been by the way that the moon looks. So, 7 days, 7 days, 7 days, 7 days in the quarters. But, if you did a fortnight, a 14-day period, you're already starting to half the cycle, from new moon to full moon, from full moon to new moon, from first quarter to third quarter, from third quarter to first quarter. It's actually 14.75 days. And even in, ancient time, you would notice that. You're off by a whole day. So I think this is a very unsatisfying answer of why we have 7-day weeks. Why do we have those 7-day weeks? It's not the moon. You see, the 7-day weeks, the answer is revealed in the names of the days of the week themselves. We have a day of the week that is literally named after the 7 gods of the sky. And in the English, we can see very clearly 3 of them. The first one is the day of the sun, and do you recognize the second one now? The day of the moon's day. And if you jump all the way down to the bottom, whose day? Saturn's day. 3 things in the sky that don't do what the stars do. They wander amongst the stars. But if you look in the French and the Spanish, you will also see the wanderers of the sky in the names of the days of the week. So Tuesday is whose day? Mars's day. Wednesday is Mercury's day. Thursday is Jupiter's day. And Friday is Venus's day. The 7 things in the sky that don't do what the stars do, that you can see with the naked eye without the use of a telescope. But now, are you ready for this? You have been educated tonight. You have been entertained, hopefully, and you have been educated. Because in the English, descended from the Germanic tribes, the language, you can see that great warrior, the only one brave enough to put his hand in Fenrir's mouth. Who? Tyrsday. Yeah? Tyrsday. Or Tew, T-I-W, Tuesday. And Odin, known in the south as Woden, known as Woden's Day, Wednesday. And the most obvious, whose day? Thor, Thor's day. And finally, the goddess's day. Whose day? Freya's day. Freya's day, like Venus's day. The names themselves reveal the 7 things in the sky that don't do what the stars do. There they are, our 7 days of the week. Are you amazed? Did you know this before? All right, now, I've been moving because I wanted to keep this talk to a reasonable hour, but I have so much more to tell you. I found these amazing engravings from a Roman perspective. Now, by the way, the names that you know of the planets, those gods of the sky, are the Roman names. All right, those are the Roman names. And this was a series of plates, Adrian Colliarts, I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, but it's something like that. There are the septum planetae, the 7 planets. You see, because in the ancient use of the word planets, it literally means the wanderers. And there were 7 things in the sky that didn't do what the stars did. Those were the 7 planets. Those were referred to, all 7, as planets. Now you say, that's not what we say today. Yeah, I know, but that's not how these were created. So let's take a look at each of these, and let's play a guessing game. I've now put them in a weird order, but I want to see if you can identify, right, this Roman god who's sitting up there on the cloud with the thunderbolts. Who's got the thunderbolts? Jupiter. Jupiter, the god of lightning and thunder, the blank of the gods. Yeah, the ruler, the king of the gods. All right, there he is, Jupiter up there. Now, we just said it. What planet is that? Oh, yeah, that's Jupiter. All right. And in the Greek, though, there's a god that gets paired up. Because, see, the Romans, they kind of conquered the world there in their area. And their empire extended out. And the Romans believed that their culture was the real culture, the Roman culture. And that all these other, peoples that they conquered, their gods were really their gods in disguise. And so, the Greeks had a god that was just like, it's just Jupiter in disguise. Who was it? Zeus, exactly, there he is. See, but the Norse had a name for this god of thunder too. Who is that? The Norse god of thunder, literally the thunderer, Thor, with his smashing hammer, because when you hear the thunder, that's Thor smashing his hammer. Right, that's the sound that it makes. It's that powerful. But wait, whose day? Whose day? Thor's day, exactly, yes. All right, guessing game number 2. Who's that up in the cloud there with that little cute baby, the wings, with the little arrows and stuff? Who's that? Cupid is the baby, but the mother is Venus, the Roman name, the name that we use for the planets. That's Venus. And Venus is the goddess of love and the goddess of beauty. Now, these gods, I'm simplifying, right? There's lots of things that they're gods of. There's long lists. But wait, there's the planet. What was the Roman name? Venus. The Greek name. Who is Venus? Oh, Aphrodite is just Venus in disguise, born of the sea foam. And the Norse had a name for the goddess of love and beauty. Freya. Whose day? That's Freya day. That's Freya's day. Yes. Viernes, Venus's day. All right, who's this guy with the axes and the swords and the shields and the helmet? Mars, yeah? Militant Mars, the god of war. Yes, the god of war. The Roman, there it is, the planet Mars. There he is. But in the Greek, we have Ares. Yes, I'm hearing it. Ares is the god. And the Norse, they had a warrior god, a god of war, a god of courage. Tyr or Tew, and there he is. Look at that arm. Do you see what happened to him? He got his hand bit off by Fenrir the wolf. Now, there was a picture that I showed you earlier, and, I forgot, see, Tuesday. Yeah, that's what we were talking about, Mars's day. Okay, There was a picture that I showed you earlier, and in that picture, I bet that you did not notice something, but you might notice it now. Do you see his arm holding the shield? What is that? That is his bitten off hand. Can you believe it? Fenrir bit that hand off. There he is, depicted in the way that he is often depicted. All right, who's this guy? That is Mercury. Now, you could tell Mercury. It's obvious if you look at the caduceus. Yeah, the caduceus. That was a word I was working on for this. The caduceus, that scepter with the snakes, that symbol of medicine today. But that is Mercury. And Mercury is the blank of the gods, the messenger of the gods indeed. Because Mercury, now if you think about Mercury, the planet in the sky, it dances around the sun. Did you notice that when I was doing Stellarium? There was this light in the sky that was dancing around the sun back and forth. And you can observe Mercury, but as soon as you observe Mercury, it moves back into being washed out by that sunrise or that sunset. It descends from the sky down to the earth and into the underworld. Mercury made many voyages into the underworld to communicate with messages between the living and the dead. Now, there's Mercury, and in the Greek, we have Hermes. I heard it, Hermes. And there is Hermes, this masterpiece right here, on the river, and these dead souls reaching out in one of these voyages between the land of the living and the land of the dead. But in the Norse, who is Mercury? This is the weirdest one. I told you tonight, right? But who is Mercury? Loki is not it. Loki is not it. It's Odin. Odin gets paired up with Mercury. It's a weird pairing, but it's a pairing nonetheless. And the picture that I showed you earlier tonight had Odin there. And he got his crows, Hugin and Munin, he's got his wolves, but look at that staff that he's carrying. Isn't that interesting? Yeah? The caduceus. There it is. Now, that's a more modern piece of art that I found, but it shows this, right, this affiliation of the one god with the other. Woden's day, Wednesday. Mercury's day, Miércoles. Now, who is this guy? Because I told you some Norse stories tonight, and I've now gone through the four gods that I really wanted to give you some flavor for. But what about this guy? The sigh gives it away. Do you know this guy with the sigh? It's not Pluto. It's one of the 7 gods of the sky, the ancient 7 gods of the sky that you can see without a telescope. Who is this god with the sigh? Is Saturn. Because Saturn is the god of, I heard it, of time. You could see in the picture over there the hourglass. For all of us, our time is running out, and the ultimate end of our time here is the sigh. The reaper is going to come to reap, and we're all going to die. Death awaits all of us. Saturn awaits all of us in the end. Now, Saturn is also a baby eater. That baby looks in distress. That baby is not happy right there. That baby is about to get eaten by Saturn, who is also affiliated with lead. Kind of makes you go crazy when you got the lead pipes and you get it too much in the system and the synapses of the brain, and you get fits of rage. You get nuts. You eat the babies. But that's Saturn. Look at that baby, in distress with the sigh. Now, what about the Greek? Kronos is the name. I heard it out there. Kronos, like chronology, like the god of time. Kronos, the lead titan who kills his father, and who then knows that Cronus' children are prophesied to kill him, like he killed his father, Uranus. And so he ate the babies, because he didn't want any of those babies to grow up to kill him. But mothers, they love their children, and they're not going to let the fathers eat them. So the mother saved one of those babies and gave Cronus a stone in its place. And the baby that was saved, do you know who that was? The baby that was saved was Zeus, Jupiter. That was and Zeus killed Cronus. Now, what about in the Norse? Who is this Saturn, this Kronos? Well, the answer is that in the days of the week, what do we call this day? We call it Saturn Day. That's right. There is no Norse pairing. There's just Saturn's Day. Sabado. The Sabbath. The old Sabbath. Now, this guy right here, he's got a crazy haircut. That is, you don't want to admit that these are one of the gods of the sky. You don't want to admit that these are one of the planets, do you? But this thing in the sky moves through the constellations just like the other 5 that I just showed you did. This guy right here is Sol, the personification of the sun. Yes. In the Roman, that was Sol. Greek, Helios, the sun, literally the sun. Often the sun is depicted in a chariot being carried across the sky. And the Norse also called this god Sol. Now, the Norse, though, had a more ominous motivation for those chariots. And the ominous motivation was that that chariot that carried the sun was going to get eaten by the wolves that chased the sun chariot across the sky. Kept him going, right? Some motivation. Sun's Day, Domingo, literally the day of the Lord. Sun's Day, the Son of God. Now, what about this last one? Do you see what this woman is sitting on? A big, giant crescent moon. This is Luna, in the Roman, the personification of the moon. And Luna, the Greek, Selene, the Norse, Mani. And that same picture depicts the sun chariot, but also the moon chariot being chased by the wolves. Notice Selene, notice Luna with the crescent moon headdress, and notice that garb that's over the head, right? What can you do with that? You could take that garb and you could draw it over the face, yeah? You could pull that across like the phases of the moon change over time, right? There's that symbolism in the garb that's worn over top of the head. Lunes, Moon's Day, the day of the moon. All right, and finally, the last thing that I wanted to entertain you and educate you about tonight. This last piece of the puzzle is, why do we order the days of the week in the way that we do? What is up with that sequence? Let me sing you a song. There's Sunday and there's Monday, there's Tuesday and there's Wednesday, there's Thursday and there's Friday, and then there's days of the week, days of the week, days of the week, days of the week, days of the week. But why is there Friday and then there's Saturday, right? Why is there this order? The sun's day, the moon's day, Tuesday, or Mars's day, Mercury's day, Thor, or Jupiter's day, right? We get to the goddess Freya, or Venus's day, and finally Saturn. Like, what's up with the order? All right? The order's kind of like a strange order. Why do we got to put it in that order? Well, it's a 2-step process. And step 1. We could name the planets in order, I think. Could we do it right now? The order that we know in our modern times? Let's start at the sun. And the first planet out from the sun is Mercury. And then Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Stop! Because you can't see any more without the aid of a telescope. So Saturn, that's the last one, the god of time. Okay. But you see, what did we put at the center? The Earth. And from the point of view of the Earth, the geocentric, you look out and you see lights in the sky that don't do what the stars do. And some of them move faster and some of them move slower. And you know, you would think that the faster ones are closer and the slower ones are farther away. And this is kind of mainly true. And the slowest one, do you know which light in the sky that you can see without the aid of a telescope moves the slowest? The sun is not it. The slowest mover of these lights in the sky that don't do what the stars do. It is Saturn. Saturn is the slowest mover. Now, if you use the stars to judge the movement, Saturn moves through the stars. Now, it does a little retrograde, but it moves through the stars. It does a little retrograde. Moves through the stars. It does a little retrograde. But eventually, it gets all the way around through the constellations and back to where it started. We call this the sidereal period of Saturn. How long does it take to Saturn to make one time around those zodiac constellations? Does anybody know? 29 and a half years. That's it, 29 years. So there's this time, right, that I'm 43 years old. Saturn made, one circuit and like a little bit extra. Am I going to get to that second circuit of Saturn? Man, if I'm really lucky, am I going to make it to a third circuit of Saturn? But Saturn is the slowest, the god of time, tick-tocking, keeping the time way in the distance. Now, the second slowest. We got a big guess out there? Jupiter. All right, we're kind of getting the idea now. Jupiter is out there. How long does it take Jupiter to do its circuit, retrogrades included, all the way around through the constellations? The sidereal period of Jupiter is 11.9 years, basically 12 years. All right, 12 years is. This fascinates me that in the Chinese yearly calendar, there are 12 animal years. This is the year of the dragon in 2024. I don't have any evidence to support that this is exactly connected, but those Chinese years, there's 12 of them. It's a 12-year cycle. Jupiter's a 12-year cycle. The third slowest. Go for it. Yeah, Mars is the third slowest, and it takes Mars about 2 years to go through the constellations, the sidereal period of Mars. The fourth, in the middle. Now, this surprises people sometimes. The fourth slowest mover of the lights in the sky that don't do what the stars do. The sun is it. And how long does it take the sun to go through the zodiac constellations? It takes them 1 year. You're like, no, it takes the Earth 1 year to go around the sun. No, it takes the sun 1 year to go around the Earth from our perspective. We're going around each other from our perspective. That takes a year, right? I'm born in June. I'm a Gemini. The next year, you're born in June. You're a Gemini too, just like me. Yay! Because that sun is back in those same constellations after the course of the year. The third fastest, Venus. I'm going to give it to you. 225 days. Then Mercury, only 88 days, and the very fastest mover in the sky. If you just go out and observe tonight and tomorrow, you can see this thing move through the constellations. That is the moon. And the moon takes 27.3 days to go all the way around through the constellations and back again. So you say, that's not the damn order of the that's not the order. You were going to tell me the order of the days of the week, but that's not the order. Well, you see, that's the beginning of the order. That's the order from the point of view of the Earth, of the ancients of the planets. Those planetes, those wanderers of the sky are in that order. And so here's what you do. You say that the day is ruled by the planet of its first hour. And this chart right here is a little bit crazy, but if I were to do it, and now you can do it, you could be smarter even than this advanced chart, although this, maybe obscure chart of like why we have these days of the week in their order. But you would actually start on Saturn Day, because Saturn is the slowest mover in the sky. You would start on Saturn Day. Now, notice Saturn Day is ruled by Saturn because it's the beginning of the cycle of this whole thing that I'm going to show you. Saturn begins it, and we call the day by the planet that is of the first hour. And then each hour, we go in the sequence that I showed you. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. There's Saturn Day's first 7 hours. Now, let's skip. 14 hours is going to be 2 cycles of that. 21 hours is going to be 3 cycles of that. And now you've got some extra at the end. And on Saturn Day, you're going to repeat Saturn again. And then you're going to count Jupiter, Mars, and then the third one from that gets you to the next day. Because 21 is 3 sets of 7. But there's 24 hours in a day, so you got to do the 22, the 23, and the 24. You got to shift your pattern by 3. So from Saturn, we're going to shift by 3 to Jupiter, to Mars, and to the Sun. The Sun is the next day. Following Saturday is Sunday. We do a 7 group, a 7 group, a 7 group. Now, from the Sun, we're going to count 3. The next fastest mover after the Sun was Venus. then it was Mercury, and then it was the moon. And the day after Sunday is the moon's day. Cycle, cycle, cycle. You got to count 3 extras from the moon. After the moon, wait, the moon was the fastest. You got to go back to the beginning of the cycle. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Mars's day, Tuesday, Martes, that's the day that follows Monday, and so on through the cycle until you got Freya's day. You do the cycle. And from Freya, from the goddess, from Venus, we're going to count 3. From Friday, after Venus, the next fastest mover in the sky is Mercury, followed by the moon, followed by Saturn, back to the beginning of the cycle. And you have the ordering of the 7 days of the week. Hey, what a great crowd. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. This spring, look out. If you enjoyed this, I would love to have a big audience. It gets me all excited, and it motivates me. It's something that I haven't even developed yet, but I'd love to give another talk here in a similar vein, astronomy, mythology, and the keeping of time, but we could do a talk all just about Venus and the fascinating things that I've been uncovering. So thanks for coming out. Have a nice night.
Thank you so much, Peter. Did you want to take any questions? Or?
Absolutely. If there's any questions, I'd be glad. To answer them.
Okay. All right, yeah, so if you have a question, just raise your hand. I can bring the mic right out to you. You have a question? I'm going to bring it to you. Okay. What's your question?
Thank you for the story.
Very nice.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed those stories.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions out in the audience? We've got one back there.
Top 3 what? Planets.
The top 3 planets was the question for the live
My
stream.
favorite planet is the moon. All right, that's my favorite. I love the moon. It's fascinating to me, the motions of the moon. I don't know though, top 3, like that's hard for me to say, right? The motions of the moon though has fascinated me. Number 1. I can give you my number 1. Venus is going to be my second though, right? I'm developing. Venus is it's got a fascinating history. What about, I don't know, Mars I haven't gotten into Mars yet, right? I haven't found something that has locked me into, wanting to know more and more and more, going down deep rabbit holes.
All right. Any other questions out there? One here?
You had mentioned Saturn as the god of time has no Norse parallel. Does that mean there is no Norse god of time at all, or is there something to do with time?
Yeah, so I don't know. That's a good question. There is not a parallel to Saturn, right? Is there some god of time? Good question. I don't know.
All right. Any other ones? Oh, let me just check the chat really quick. And if we don't have any there, nothing there. So, okay. So no, nothing in the live chat either. So at this point, Sasha, do you know if the skies have cleared up at all, or?
We might have some patches.
Okay. Well, we can certainly go out and check and see. If you do not get to look through a telescope tonight to observe the night sky, like I said, we're happy to take you on a telescope tour if you haven't been out to the observatory. But we'd also like to give you a complimentary pass to return to Kopernik on a hopefully a clear Friday. So we'll see if the skies are behaving, though. With that said, thank you so much again, Peter, for that terrific presentation. And yeah, let's go see what's out there if there's anything. All right, thanks.